Imagine a world where faces are immortal, lines are legendary, and every gesture is etched into the memory of millions. The stars of Hollywood's golden age commanded the silver screen with unmatched charisma, and their performances continue to captivate audiences decades later. But behind the glamour and the timeless smiles, many of these icons faced a private, devastating battle, one that no director, script, or spotlight could shield them from. Alzheimer's disease slowly stole their memories, erased the brilliance of their minds, and reminded the world that even the most celebrated among us are not immune to life's cruelties. From legendary heroes who parted seas on screen to detectives who never missed a clue, from glamorous love goddesses to beloved comedians, this is the untold story of 11 Golden Age stars whose brightest lights were dimmed by the cruel grip of Alzheimer's. Their fame lives on, their performances immortal, but their final years tell a story far more human, heart-wrenching, and profoundly moving. Charlton Heston, the warrior who couldn't fight his final battle. Charlton Heston spent his entire career playing men who conquered empires, split seas, and led armies with nothing more than courage and conviction. For decades, Hollywood didn't just admire him, it mythologized him. He was Moses, Ben-Hur, Michelangelo, and even the last man on earth. In every story he touched, he stood as the unbreakable force who battled chaos and won. But life doesn't follow movie scripts. In his final years, the hero who had endured the harshest Hollywood storms found himself gradually pulled into a fog he could not push back, a slow, silent unraveling of memory. At first, nobody around him recognized the signs. A missed word here, a forgotten date there, moments that seemed harmless, moments that could be explained away. But the people closest to him, especially his wife Lydia, began noticing something far more painful. The man who once memorized pages of dialogue with ease now paused, searching for thoughts that used to rise instantly. As the condition deepened, the gap between the legend on screen and the vulnerable man at home widened. Heston's booming presence softened. His once flawless recollection faltered. There were days he spoke with the same authority he always had, and days when clarity slipped out of reach. Hollywood had celebrated him as a giant. Yet in these moments inside the walls of his home, he was simply a man confronting something he never imagined would happen to him. And the harsh truth is this: even the strongest heroes can face battles their bodies refuse to fight. Lydia stood by him through every stage. She watched a lifetime of memories blur, the film sets, the victories, the friendships, the applause that once echoed everywhere he went. Through every high and low, she remained the steady anchor he leaned on. Charlton Heston left behind a legacy of characters defined by bravery. But his final years revealed a different kind of courage, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't roar on a battlefield, the kind that exists in facing each day with dignity, even as pieces of the past slowly fade away. His story reminds us that strength is not just about conquering the world. Sometimes it is about holding on to yourself, even when the world starts to slip from memory. Ronald Reagan, the president who fought invisible shadows. Ronald Reagan lived a life bigger than the screens he once occupied. He was an actor, a leader, and ultimately the president who influenced an entire generation's political landscape. His words inspired millions. His optimism became national philosophy. Even after leaving office, people saw him not simply as a leader, but as a symbol of steadiness and hope. But behind the dignified smiles and the carefully crafted speeches, something else was unfolding. Quietly, gradually, Reagan began noticing changes. Small at first, then difficult to ignore. Moments when names slipped away. Moments when he repeated questions, moments when decisions took longer than they once did. The man known for his quick wit and impeccable timing started losing his grasp on details that used to come effortlessly. For someone who built a career on communication, these lapses weren't just frustrating, they were frightening. Nancy Reagan became the constant guardian of his world. She protected his privacy fiercely, not out of denial, but out of love, shielding him from the public eye, shielding him from speculation, shielding him from a media cycle that wouldn't understand the dignity he still carried within him. Together, they faced something far more difficult than politics, a slow rewrite of memory itself. Yet even in those quiet struggles, Reagan's spirit didn't fully dim. He maintained his warmth, his humor, and the gentle charm that had defined him for decades. He continued writing letters. He greeted people with kindness. He found comfort in routine. And Nancy remained with him every step, guiding him through a landscape that no longer stayed familiar. Reagan's journey reminds us of something deeply human. Even the world's most powerful figures can face vulnerabilities beyond their control. And sometimes the true test of a person's character is not in how they lead a country, but in how they face the slow fade of memory with grace. Burgess Meredith, the silent fight of a Hollywood survivor. Burgess Meredith was one of those rare actors who transcended generations. To some, he was Mickey, the tough love trainer pushing Rocky Balboa beyond his limits. To others, he was the Penguin, a villain whose laugh echoed across early comic book television history. And to older audiences, he was the seasoned theater veteran with unmatched versatility. What most people didn't know was how many storms he survived throughout his life. Financial struggles, personal losses, professional droughts, always managing to return stronger than before. But in his final years, Burgess faced a challenge unlike any he'd encountered. A challenge that didn't care about resilience, talent, or experience. His thoughts became harder to organize. Scenes from his past, once so vivid, blurred at the edges. Conversations slipped away moments after they happened. His razor-sharp creativity, the same force that energized countless performances, now flickered unpredictably. Family and friends tried to hold him steady, cherishing every moment of clarity. They said his spirit never disappeared. He just expressed it differently. Some days he was warm, articulate, and full of stories. Other days he grew quiet, distant, lost within memories that he could feel, but not fully reach. Burgess Meredith didn't exit this world loudly. His final chapter was gentle, soft, and private, a stark contrast to the dynamic characters he had played throughout his career. But perhaps that contrast is what made his story so powerful. It showed that even the greatest performers, the ones who master every stage they step onto, eventually face human fragility. And in that fragility, there is a tenderness that reminds us of the full spectrum of a life lived well. Rita Hayworth, the beauty whose world slipped out of focus. Rita Hayworth was more than a movie star. She was an icon, a global symbol of glamour, elegance, and magnetic charm. Her smile illuminated screens, her presence mesmerized audiences, and her talent placed her among Hollywood's most unforgettable legends. But behind the shimmering lights and the dazzling performances was a life filled with quiet struggles, emotional turmoil, difficult relationships, and a constant effort to maintain her place in a world that demanded perfection. In her later years, those struggles deepened into something even more heartbreaking. Rita began forgetting appointments. She misplaced valuables. She grew anxious in situations that once felt comfortable. People closest to her noticed the confusion in her eyes, the hesitation before answering a simple question, the subtle retreat from conversations she used to dominate with ease. At first, her symptoms were misunderstood as exhaustion or emotional distress. She had lived a life of relentless pressure after all. But as time passed, it became clear that something far more serious was unfolding. Her daughter, Yasmin, stepped in as both caretaker and protector. She watched her mother, once a symbol of beauty and poise, drift into moments of fear and uncertainty. Yasmin later spoke openly about those years, not to expose Rita, but to show the world the truth. Behind the glamour stood a woman who had endured far more than anyone ever knew. Rita Hayworth's journey was one of the earliest and most public examples of a Hollywood star facing the loss of memory, and it became a turning point in conversations about aging and compassion. Her legacy is not defined by the condition she battled. It is defined by the brilliance she gave the world, brilliance that time may blur but never erase. Peter Falk, COLUMBOs, Final Unsolved Mystery. For more than 3 decades, Peter Falk inhabited one of television's most brilliant minds. Lieutenant Columbo, the deceptively rumpled detective whose unassuming demeanor masked razor-sharp intelligence. Columbo noticed everything, remembered everything, and never overlooked a clue. Audiences adored him for his charm, his cleverness, and the way he could disarm the guilty with a single well-timed question. Just one more thing. Ironically, Falk's greatest mystery would be one he could not solve himself. The brilliant detective he portrayed so effortlessly on screen ultimately faced a challenge beyond logic, deduction, or cunning, the relentless erasure of memory caused by Alzheimer's disease. The signs began subtly: small lapses during conversations, forgotten names of friends and colleagues, minor confusions on set. For fans, Falk was still Columbo, endlessly clever, perpetually curious, and quietly persistent. But behind closed doors, the man who created such a meticulous character was struggling to hold on to the threads of his own life. Family members observed the changes first. They noticed that Falk could no longer recall familiar faces or recognize settings that once felt like home. The detective who unraveled complex schemes now faced the unfathomable challenge of piecing together his own identity. It was a cruel irony, almost Shakespearean in its depth. The man who portrayed mental acuity embodied the vulnerability of human frailty. By the late 2000s, his decline had become severe. Court documents eventually revealed that Falk, then in his 80s, required full-time custodial care, unable to manage daily tasks or comprehend even the most familiar surroundings. His family fought to balance privacy with the realities of care, highlighting one of the disease's most heartbreaking truths. Alzheimer's does not only steal memory, it strains relationships, challenges loved ones, and tests the bonds of family loyalty. Despite the heartbreak, Falk's legacy remains untarnished. The world remembers the detective, the sharp mind behind the rumpled coat, and the humanity he brought to every scene. Falk's story illustrates that even the brightest intellects cannot escape the vulnerabilities shared by us all. A sobering reminder that genius does not guarantee immunity from life's harshest challenges. When he passed on June 23, 2011, at age 83, the public mourned not only the death of a television icon, but also the profound human story of memory lost and dignity preserved. Columbo may have solved every case on screen, but Peter Falk's final, personal mystery stands as a poignant testament to the fragility of memory itself. 6. Gene Wilder, protecting the magic. Few performers have embodied the joy, whimsy, and wonder of cinema like Gene Wilder. From the fantastical world of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory to the hilarious parodies of Young Frankenstein, Wilder's performances were infused with a warmth, intelligence, and gentle comic genius that left lasting impressions across generations. Yet, behind the exuberance and infectious laughter, Wilder faced a challenge he chose to keep private. Diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2013, Wilder made a conscious decision. The world would remember him as he had always been, full of life, not as someone diminished by illness. Family members explained the choice after his death in 2016. He wanted to protect his fans, especially children, from seeing the man he had become in his final years. "He kept it private so we would remember him as he was," said his nephew. This decision reflects Wilder's enduring thoughtfulness, a final act of care and performance for his audience. While many celebrities use their fame to advocate publicly, Wilder chose a different path. He demonstrated that courage comes in many forms, Some fight in the spotlight, using their struggles to raise awareness, fight quietly, preserving dignity and joy for those who remember them most fondly. Even as his cognitive abilities waned, those who knew him personally emphasized that Wilder's essential qualities, his warmth, kindness, and gentle humor, never disappeared. He remained, in essence, the person audiences had loved for decades. When he passed away at age 83, the world mourned the loss of the magical performances he left behind, even as his family honored the privacy he had chosen. Gene Wilder's story reminds us that memory loss does not erase who we are at the core. It shows us the power of choice in facing decline, whether to advocate or to protect, or simply to live quietly, dignified, and remembered on one's own terms. Maurice Evans, Shakespeare's Man Silenced by Time. Maurice Evans was the quintessential Shakespearean actor, bringing the bard's complex language to life on stage and on screen. He was a master of nuance, a performer whose ability to inhabit characters transcended genre, from the sophistication of classical theater to the charm of television series like Bewitched, to even science fiction roles in films like Planet of the Apes. Evans' brilliance lay in his command of language and emotion. His ability to express thought, conflict, and triumph made him unforgettable. Yet, like so many of the Golden Age stars, he would eventually face an opponent that no training, discipline, or talent could overcome: Alzheimer's disease. By the early 1980s, those closest to Evans began noticing the subtle erosion of his memory. Lines that once rolled effortlessly from his lips became more difficult to recall. Conversations became fragmented. Though he never married or had children, friends and colleagues became his surrogate family, supporting him as his condition worsened. Unlike some celebrities, Evans' struggle remained private. His retreat from public life was quiet and largely unnoticed by the wider world. Yet this silence, rather than diminishing the tragedy, highlighted a broader truth about Alzheimer's. For every headline-grabbing story of a famous figure, there are countless others whose battles are waged in private, away from the cameras, the applause, and the bright lights. By the late 1980s, Evans' cognitive decline had reached the point where basic communication became a challenge. A man once revered for his eloquence and precision now relied on those around him to navigate everyday tasks. When he passed on March 12, 1989, at age 87, his obituary celebrated his artistic achievements, while only subtly acknowledging the illness that had gradually silenced him. Evans' story is a testament to the private, often invisible struggle faced by so many in the performing arts. While some stars bring public attention to Alzheimer's, Evans' journey reminds us that dignity and care can exist quietly, even as brilliance slowly fades. 8. Estelle Getty, The Golden Girl's Private Battle. Estelle Getty became a household name and an enduring icon through her unforgettable portrayal of Sophia Petrillo, the sharp-tongued, quick-witted matriarch on The Golden Girls. Though she was decades younger than the character she embodied, Getty brought an authenticity, energy, and impeccable comic timing that made Sophia feel real, wise, and unforgettable. Her delivery was precise yet effortless, balancing humor and insight in a way that left audiences laughing one moment and nodding in recognition the next. Fans adored her for creating some of television's most memorable lines, each delivered with a perfect blend of timing, intelligence, and personality. Sophia Petrillo became more than a character. She became a cultural touchstone, a symbol of wit and resilience, and a figure whose presence on screen could light up any scene. Ironically, while Getty brought to life a woman in her 80s with vibrancy and mental sharpness, she began experiencing the earliest signs of Alzheimer's in her early 60s, years before her character's age. The very mind that had been her greatest instrument, capable of memorizing lines and creating spontaneous comedic brilliance, began to falter. Simple dialogue that had once come naturally now became a source of anxiety. On set, Getty would occasionally panic, worried she would forget her lines or lose the rhythm that defined her performance. The contrast between Sophia's sharpness and Getty's private struggles created a deeply poignant tension, a cruel irony that only those closest to her fully understood. Getty's diagnosis was confirmed in 2000, after years of subtle but persistent symptoms that were initially attributed to stress, normal aging, or stage fright. By that time, she had withdrawn from much of public life, relying on her family to protect her privacy and provide care. Alzheimer's stripped her not only of memory, but also of independence, requiring assistance with daily tasks she had once performed effortlessly. Despite the relentless progression of the disease, Getty's life remained a testament to courage, resilience, and grace. She passed away on July 22, 2008, just shy of her 85th birthday. While fans remembered her as the witty, feisty Sophia Petrillo, her family quietly honored the profound personal struggle she endured, highlighting the deeply human and private cost of Alzheimer's, a reminder that even the brightest, most beloved stars are not immune to life's cruelest challenges. Glenn Ford, Hollywood's everyman lost in time. Glenn Ford was Hollywood's quintessential everyman, a dependable leading man whose career spanned more than 4 decades and whose presence on screen exuded a quiet charisma that audiences trusted. From the intense, noir-driven drama of Gilda to the rugged charm and moral complexity of westerns like 3:10 to Yuma, Ford brought a sense of reliability and authenticity to every role he inhabited. He was the man audiences could count on to portray strength, integrity, and resilience, a familiar figure in a cinematic landscape that was constantly evolving. His performances had a relatability that made him beloved across generations, earning him a unique place in Hollywood's pantheon of classic stars. Yet, in the final chapter of his life, Ford faced a struggle far removed from the controlled, heroic characters he so often portrayed. Alzheimer's disease began to erode the mental sharpness and decisiveness that had defined him both on and off the screen. The contrast between his on-screen confidence and his private vulnerability was both poignant and heartbreaking. Symptoms emerged gradually in the early 1990s, subtle at first, but increasingly noticeable over time. Tasks that had once been second nature, remembering appointments, organizing daily routines, even recalling past conversations, became difficult. The disease's slow progression was mercifully measured compared to others, but its emotional impact on his family was profound.